recorded at that time they lost his head, and they don't know where it is anymore.
Wow.
So he was dead, and then they were, well, I don't know, particularly still angry with him. They wanted to, show their continuing, ongoing displeasure, and so they then, even though they were presumably in quite a state of decay, they were hanged and drawn and quartered. So it was pretty gruesome. But if you did a little research on him, you would actually find the name of that square where he was executed, where they erected a gallows, and probably be able to read the accounts of the people who've claimed to have seen him and the two chaps who were executed again with him walking across the square. But it's one of those well-known examples of hauntings in London, and it's very well attested apparently, as opposed to just someone on a dark night having seen someone. They walk across the square apparently in broad daylight. So,
I mean, according to I read it on the internet, it said that they were hung, like they were brought out in Tyburn, and then their heads were chopped off to be shown in Westminster.
That's right, and that's when they lost. Well, according to the details, historical details, they say it wasn't here at Tyburn that they were actually hung. It was actually in one of the city square, well, one of the squares between here and the actual centre of London. So, yes, but not at Tyburn. So apparently authenticated, but not here. But I only can go by the books. I don't know more than that.
So,
okay.
One more question. The martyrs,
Yeah.
are they're all saints now?
Of the 300, there are 116 that there is not sufficient historical detail for them to go through the course of canonisation, which requires a lot of historical detail. They were living at a time when they were living under false names. They were going secretly at night from house to house. So no one was writing about them, no one was talking about them under their real names. They were going by their aliases. But that said, of the rest of the 300, we've got maybe about 60 of them canonised, a group of 40 in 1970, and then another 85 were beatified by Pope John Paul II in 1989. So not all of them have, and then there are a considerable group of them who are venerable. That means they've started the journey to canonisation, but it hasn't got the whole way yet. So you've probably got about 60 of them fully canonised martyrs. You've got at least 85, and I think there are more of them, but there were 85 in the one go, who've been beatified. You've got a considerable group of venerables who haven't made it through to the beatification process yet. And then you've got a group of 116 of whom there's not sufficient historical data, so they'll probably never be canonised.
Oh, and are they made saints because they were persecuted? Or is there anything more?
They had to have been executed solely for the fact that they refused to give up the faith. So you've got a lot more Catholics who are executed even here who will never be counted among the martyrs because there was political involvement, and any political involvement automatically cancelled you out of the list of the group that could be considered as martyrs. So the ones who have been canonised or whose process is being considered are ones that they can say quite clearly there was no political involvement. And so it was the fact that they actually died rather than accept the king or the queen as head of the church, or that they refused to conform to go along to the new church services, what we now call the established church. And so they are the ones who are actually considered as martyrs.
Yeah. It's quite a tricky rule though, because I was looking at all the people that were executed, and it does really overlap the political and the religious kind of
that's right. There were many people who were Catholic, who were involved in political things, who were executed. But that list of, I think it's 307 or 305, who were considered for canonisation, the first requirement was no political involvement. And so they're a group of people who they can historically prove were not involved with politics, that it was purely their religious grounds.
I mean, I find that a bit complex because, I mean, one thing about religion, isn't it, to like, you want to be able to help other people. Like, I'm not really religious, but that's the idea, right? To help the less able.
Right. Well, yeah.
And I mean,
no, not the base thing. The base thing is your worship of God.
Yeah.
And if someone tells you your way of worshipping God, which has been practiced here in England for centuries, is now illegal, some people will conform to save their lives or to save their properties, but you had a good number who were executed, who were imprisoned and died in prison, who went into voluntary exile or who were exiled. And you could be exiled for attending a mass, you know, just getting caught at a house mass somewhere. You could be exiled for life, and it happened to many of them. They're just not allowed back in the country. So the ones that we're particularly interested here were their only cause of offence was their Catholic belief. So there were lots of others who were Catholic and who were involved in the politics of the time. They don't appear on that list because the first requirement, Mary Queen of Scots, for example, was politically involved. Therefore, she'll never be counted among the martyrs. But she was executed actually because she was a Catholic princess and therefore a threat to Elizabeth. So there are like lots of people who might perhaps have been considered on the list of the martyrs who simply do not qualify because of their political involvement.
I mean, why is that? Because I mean, there was one man called Dr. John Story who was a monk, but he was also like he defended the poor against the king, and because of that he was executed. I don't think he was made a saint, but he was a priest.
Right.
He was executed at Tyburn.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't really understand that because they're helping.
See, at the acts, and in fact,